Hello, and welcome back to a bonus episode of the Circus of Safety, season 2. And I've got to be fair, guys. I absolutely almost missed this. So I've done no research. I think it's season 2. I think it's episode 20, and it's a bonus episode. So, listen. Des, I'm a little bit nervous, right? I'm a little bit nervous about this because we know Andy's a consultant and actually doesn't do any work, right? Now, Andy had one job, right? And that one job last week was to go out and get us a expert in the topic of learning teams. Now, I don't know do you remember last week's show, Des? How vividly do you remember that show last week?
Not very well. I haven't had the chance to revisit that yet, but I'm hoping that Andy can pull a miracle on this one.
Well, mate, listen, I remember it vividly because all I heard was Andy rattling on about rubbing shoulders with the big wigs of safety, rubbing shoulders with people that have written books, telling us he knew all these experts and learning teams and
lobster dinners and stuff involved. There's all sorts of stuff.
Exactly. So he was making a big deal of this, right? He was like, "Oh, I know this guy Brent. He's written a book, and I'll get him on." And then to make matters worse, mate. Do you remember how his entire defense? Well, it wasn't even defense. No one was actually even arguing with him last week, but his entire input into the show was paraphrasing the book that Brent Sutton and a number of other people wrote. Right? Do you remember that at all?
I do, yeah.
So
I hope he's really pulled the cat out of the hat with this one.
I mean, when you had to organise a special guest, you did it. Well done. I've done it. Now, Andy, have you managed to do what you needed to do?
I believe I have.
You believe you have. So sitting in the green room right now should be none other than Brent Sutton. Is that what we're saying?
I'm quietly optimistic.
Okay, well, I'm going to go to the green room. I'm going to see if he's there, and fingers crossed, when I come back, we have him. So
he better be there.
He better be there. This is all good. Well, there he is.
Yes.
The man, the myth, the legend. It's Brent Sutton. How are you, Brent?
Good, guys. My apologies that Todd Conklin couldn't join us today because he wanted a real expert. I'm just a ghostwriter. So, or I'm actually, I was the first generation of AI.
Wow.
Which stands for actual intelligence.
Oh, get it out. Well, this is off to a cracker start. So Brent, can we be up front here? What is this costing Andy for you to be on the show? Just putting it out there.
Well, seeing I paid for lunch last time, Andy's promised to pay for morning tea.
Wow.
As long as it doesn't exceed more than, well, we have to share the cup with 2 straws.
Yeah.
And he's asked for a muffin with 2 knives. So.
Mate, economy's tough out there for consultants that don't have a real job, right? Like, you got to do what you got to do, right?
Absolutely. But look, I'm pleased to be on the show. I mean, I received probably half a dozen texts last week about the show.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so I thought maybe some responsible grown-up adult should join. And
so we're still looking for that person?
Yeah.
Do you know anyone, Brent?
Exactly. And obviously learning teams are real because I've got a neon sign behind me to say that they're real.
Listen, this is really awkward, right? Like, I don't think we've actually had a guest on the show that's turned up and trumped us at what we do. And I tell you what, you've taken the cake. You've got a real microphone, and that looks like a Rode microphone. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, it's a real Rode.
Wow, top of the range. You're in a studio of some sort with a neon sign saying learning teams.
Yep.
Wow.
That's what the big money buys you, a neon sign.
So obviously
we can change colours of it as well if you like.
No, listen, don't. No, really?
Yeah.
Wow, but the blue goes nicely with your eyes, so maybe we'll just
leave it. Thank you.
Well, this is not going well. We might need to come to you for some business advice because it sounds like, if you can afford Rode, you're obviously making money out of this, and we clearly aren't because we're not even in a real studio. I think
Jeff Bezos is making most of the money, but I'm making some.
Oh, well, hey, some is better than none, like us, right? But that's okay. Apparently, we're doing it for the love of the profession.
Wow.
We've had, I've bumped into you a few times over the years. You obviously got a good relationship with Andy. But listen, to be fair, our only claim to fame is we got one person that lives in Canada that listens to the show. Her name's Crystal. Hi, Crystal. Now, she might not know who you are, so it'd be really good if, for those people that have joined in or thought they'd listen to an expert on this topic, maybe do you want to give us a brief intro to who you are, what you're doing, and your involvement with, say, the concept of learning teams?
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you for that. First of all, I'm not an expert. I just like to say that I'm an avid practitioner.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. I don't know what it takes to become an expert, but certainly I'm seeing a lot of HOP experts and a lot of learning team experts. So maybe I'll grow up and become one someday. But in the meantime, I'll just be an avid practitioner. So guys, my name's Brent Sutton. I'm the founder of an organization called Learning Teams, Inc. And no surprising that we basically support organizations on the journey of putting in human organizational performance and also learning teams. But more importantly is that we actually support the community in their growth. So we have a commercial part to our organization, and we actually have a community part as well, which is free. And we make available to people for non-commercial use all our products at $0.
Wow, that's I've almost got a tear to my eye. That's amazing. And here we were talking a minute ago about how we could take money from people, and now you're telling us you give stuff away. This is awkward.
Well, you can do both. Call it pay it forward. You can do it both. Nice. But the reality is probably my journey. I'm trying to think now. Andy would know that I typically deal on the dark side of safety, normally when things have gone horribly wrong. And for me, my journey with learning teams was driven by the fact that I felt that doing investigations wasn't mentally healthy for me. And it certainly wasn't mentally healthy for the people I was having to interview in those investigations. And I did a bit of a Google search, and I came across this crazy guy called Todd Conklin. And his classic saying was, never mix a laxative in a sleeping pill. And as a failed engineer, my first question was, does it matter in which order?
I'm just bemused that somebody's actually clearly tried this to prove that you shouldn't do it.
Yes. But luckily they make man nappies these days.
Oh my God.
And the reality was that what Todd was talking about is that when things go wrong, although they may be unwelcomed, they're actually not unexpected. Because here's the crazy thing. You guys have risk registers, or I call them hope registers, and they'll be full of risks that basically says that the consequence is a life-changing event.
And are you looking for an answer here? Or?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're there, aren't they? You guys have hope registers?
Yeah. Yep.
With death as a likely outcome?
No.
Try not to, but that might be how we've got onto this show, though. So maybe we're not the best examples.
Yeah, but organisations all have, we call them sticky, stuff that can kill you.
Yes. Yep.
So why surprised when it happens? Why are you surprised when energy changes someone's life?
Well, I guess because regardless of whether it's naively or not, people assume that the stuff that they put down there to prevent said events from occurring should have worked.
Right. Although the risk registers said that there was residual energy that could do that, which I find fascinating. So from my point of view, I was looking for something that would create a learning opportunity, because I'm not aware of any worker that has received a corrective action, gone home to their loved ones, spoken around the table on the Sunday night roast, shared their corrective action, so proud they framed it, shared it with the entire family, and so proud it's now going to go into the games room with all the other sporting memorabilia.
Clearly, you'd be a fan of the castle then as well.
Big fan. So I was looking for something different, and that's what learning teams were.
Fantastic.
So shoot away, guys. Let's go
So-
for gold.
So the just a bit more of the background there, Brent. So was learning teams a thing that was around before you became involved in it, or were you?
Yes, no, absolutely it was. It's something that it had different names, but it's something that existed within the realms of human organisational performance for quite some time. There was a version that Rob Fisher was using from Fisher Improvement Technology, and they called them basically facilitated improvement teams.
Yeah.
So that whole notion, you could actually go back to Deming's era,
Yeah.
and you may have come across something called a quality circle.
Yeah.
You could look in the world of Lean and Six Sigma, and there's something called a Kaizen. You could go to BP and find something called double loop learning. There are lots of these things that exist that basically ask you to get a group of people together and talk through a situation or problem. The concept isn't novel. The principles and the process are something that's unique to HOP.
Yeah. So I think a lot of those examples that you talked about were a little bit framed within organisations or developed within organisations for specific purposes. I think there wasn't there something similar in the nuclear industry as well? Didn't they have a?
Well, that is HOP as nuclear.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So
the heritage. Yeah, so the heritage going back now, and actually, in fact, I've got a new podcast series coming out on the origins of HOP.
Cool.
The going back to the late 1990s, there was lots of work being done as North America was opening more nuclear power stations, and there was work that was being engaged that both Professor James Reason and Professor Jans Rasmussen were involved in, and that was called human performance. And then that morphed into human performance improvement, and then it morphed into what you know today as human and organizational performance. I spoke this year at the 30th anniversary of HOP.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's quite an achievement for an avid practitioner, right? I mean, to be invited to speak at the 30th anniversary.
Absolutely. And I was invited because of my work in learning teams and the 4Ds. I was invited because of our disruptive nature that Kiwis like to innovate.
Now, I've picked up on something earlier, and before the fanboy Andy Evans, who's clearly corrupted by you, carries on with the very nice questioning, I'm just going to ask you, so what I picked up on, and this might be the end of the show, because I think I've worked it out, right? I think I've nailed this. Des, I'm going to get you to jump in here and see if this is right. So what learning teams are, Brent, is getting a bunch of people together to learn. Is that pretty much the concept?
Yes, but to learn not only why things have gone wrong, but also to learn why things go right.
So Des, does that clear it up for you? Like, are we done here? Can we wrap this up and move on, or do we? I've got some more questions though, so I could keep going.
I think so, because it's a familiar concept with a new name.
What's
that's
called
being
adult
applied
education.
in a specific way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's only been around for a couple of thousand years so far. I think a guy called Hippocrates. I think there's a couple of people out there, some Greek guys, that came up with these options. So,
ancient Greek.
I think, Brent, now this is, I'm going to have to stand fast here because you've now tickled Des, tickled him pink with your mention of ancient Greece. And so I guess...
Because he likes a kebab.
he would if he could. Because I guess one of my worries, right, as an avid practitioner of nothing, is you come up with all these things, right, and I guess you go, oh well, and the worry for myself is that people go, oh, learning teams, it's this new thing, I've got to jump on this fad, and so what you've really articulated to me, which is really great, and really, I guess something we've been trying to understand is it's not a new concept as you've identified it. It's while you might have honed in some of the tools and the resources and the application of what's going on, it is actually something that we've been doing for a very long time, which is quite pleasing.
Yeah, and I'd say it actually humanises investigations.
Yeah. Now my next question, which I mean, do you see this concept being applied solely in large organizations? Because I think that was one of the things that we spoke about last week is, is it realistic to expect a small business operator to stop everything they're doing while they may want to? Is it realistic for them to do that, pull everybody together, to sit down effectively around a table, hold hands, sing Kumbaya, to understand what's going on? Or are you noticing this is only a large organization thing, or are you seeing it across large and small organizations?
Sure. Well, obviously, before they sing Kumbaya, I presume you guys have developed some life-saving rule, because someone's going to light a fire as they all sit around, and everyone's going to be involved with marshmallows.
Well, we've substituted the fire for an LED light in the middle of
right.
the table.
Okay, excellent. I just want to make sure that this has been done safe. Look, I think there's many things here. You've got to understand that harm can only happen from energy. So when an event happens, that how it happened is super obvious. And I can do any form of investigation in 10 minutes by understanding the energy, how it got released. No, because let's face it, work equals risk. So if we understand what the work the person was doing, and we understand how the harm happened, we can understand the energy. That's pretty straightforward. The thing about the learning team is, how do we improve the system? And improving the system, and in actual fact, and then helping people to learn, because if we want to change behavior, we can't beat them into submission with another corrective action. We actually have to create a learning environment. So the whole notion of what you guys call Kumbaya is that rather than putting the worker in the center and placing the spotlight on them, on their actions or inactions, we're actually putting the system in the center, putting people around it, and asking, how did the system support you in good work? Because shockingly, there's not a huge difference between what normal work looked like and what work was on the day of the event. What comes as a shock to organizations is the gap between work as imagined and work as done, or what we call in HOP, black line, blue line.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was when we talked about the hope registers, I love that concept, right? I think the organizations wholeheartedly believe that they're going to be saved by that register, right? Well, this is what we did, and that's that whole work is imagined versus work is done. I mean, Des, what are your thoughts? What are you picking up on what Brent's saying?
Well, I'm quite keen to know or get Brent's view on the idea of, given the concept is not new, it's been around for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. Do you think health and safety professionals, practitioners, adopt this sort of thing intuitively, or do you think that there's some sort of disconnect there generally?
Well, I think there's two things here. I mean, I asked the question, what's their role? If their role is to be the gatekeeper or the police officer of compliance, then learning is going to be very foreign. If they see their role as being an enabler and facilitating better work, then a learning team is an easy and natural fit.
Oh, great stuff there, Brent. Andy, what about you, mate? You seem to be sitting there. I mean, we know you're a fanboy, mate, and corrupted. You're sitting there nodding every time Brent opens his mouth. I mean, any thoughts, concepts from you?
Yeah, lots. I think what you've just said was almost as if you'd taken it word from the previous podcast that I was talking about, Brent. So feel free to acknowledge me there.
That's because you were reading his book.
I felt the hand. There was something moving my lip. I felt the hand. God. So, yeah.
This just, I think,
We just finished Halloween, so
I'm
yeah.
going to have to now put explicit content on Spotify thanks to you two. Thank you. Talking about hands and touching.
Well, it's called human and organisational profanity.
Sorry, Andy, carry on with your question here.
So I'm just interested in where you've seen the most success with learning teams. Is it all the type of organisation? So, and I'm not sure what your take is on, but if we talk about sort of a safety culture maturity model, I'm not sure how that sits with HOP at all, whether it's a completely alien concept. But you've got organisations that on one end that are doing safety only when they've had an accident, and then you've got other ones that safety is sort of deemed to be at the centre of everything they do. You work with a range of businesses on that spectrum, I guess.
Yeah, I think
where would the success be? Because if you're at the sort of the right hand side of a culture maturity model, then could you only be there if you've applied the principles of HOP?
I would have to say the answer is no.
Ooh.
Okay, because you got to understand what drives an organisation. So I think there's a couple of things here. If I look at, the origins of HOP and learning teams is from nuclear. It's all from high energy. So, the origins are centered in that main circle. But if I look at the majority of implementation of HOP and learning teams, they're in operational improvement, operational excellence, not in safety.
Yeah.
Safety, good operations equals good safety. And if I go back to the work of Edward Deming, Edward Deming said there are three parts that can exist in systems. There are things that add value. There are things that are non-valued activities like compliance, and there's stuff that's waste. And learning teams allows organizations to see those things. So I've got lots of organizations who still trump zero harm. They've got all the slogans, they've got all the campaigns.
Yep.
And they're using this to drive better operations.
Yep.
Now, here's the irony. If now applying this in a humanizing way, when the initial driver was about improving operations. And shock horror, when they discovered that by listening to the front line, by listening to people that actually do the work, who face the risk, that maybe their input can actually help to build better systems.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really interesting. And if we go back to the concept of energy, if you go right back to basics, it shouldn't be a surprise, because operational effectiveness, operational efficiency is all about energy in, energy out, right?
Yes, work equals energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah,
if the energy is not going where it should be, then it can hurt somebody. If the energy's being used efficiently, it's not leaking. And if it's not leaking, people aren't getting hurt.
Yep. But I'll also say to you that if there is operational waste, like if people are being frustrated because they've got bad tools, because their process doesn't make sense, any of those things, that has an impact on safety. Today we call that psychosocial harm, but that stuff ain't new either. So, Deming's work, and I'll just share with you guys, Deming said that 90% of the reason why things go wrong, 90% is systemically driven, 10% is human driven, and of that 10%, only 1% of the 10% was knowingly. Now, I'm going to challenge you guys. That's not how safety sees this stuff.
No, it's not.
Safety sees it 90% humans.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it really depends the lens that you're applying. So in the work that we do and a learning team does, a learning team is biased towards systems. I'll just call it out.
Nice. So because and I'm going to use that poignant pause there, Brent, to tap onto something else for those that are listening. I kind of fell asleep when you and Andy started gasbagging about energy. To be fair, but what I picked up in the conversation is learning teams is again, and we've referred this in a couple of the shows that we've done. It's a tool, right? It's not the be all and end all. It's a tool that you would use alongside other tools in your toolbox to achieve outcomes of safety, right? And would that be a fair statement?
Correct. It's not a panacea. There is no cure.
Yeah. So I don't know whether I'm going to get controversial here, and so I'm really interested in your thoughts. Learning teams, the new view or safety 2, same thing, one and the same,
No.
different. What's the relationship there?
Well, they're different types of sciences.
Fascinating.
So you've got safety differently. That a lot of that work came out of the likes of Decker. You've got safety 2, of which you got work out of Hohnagel. You've got resilience engineering, which came out of Hohnagel and Woods. The heritage of HOP is from Rasmussen and Reason.
So you're totally different concept. And I think, to be fair...
Well, they all have a similar flavour,
yes,
but they come from different sciences. But things like New View, that's not a science. New View is just how people are branding or associating these things.
And I think that's potentially when you're on the ground and you're that safety person trying to think of what do I do to move the dial, for want of a better description. There's the way it's sold, marketed, portrayed, or the way people are understanding it. That could be an understanding thing too. Is that it's this whole new way of doing things, right? And it's this whole and everything's all blurred in, and you've got to be doing all these things, otherwise.
Well, the answer is no. I mean, Eric Hohnagel, although he produced a book called Safety 1, Safety 2, his new book coming out is shifting from managing safety to managing safely. And if you think about that, he regrets that labeling of Safety 1, Safety 2, because people took that as a division. In the work that we do, you do not throw out all the good stuff that you've done.
And I think if anybody takes anything away from the show, I think that's a really great point. And again, it goes back to learning teams as a tool you can use, and it's not one or the other, right? It's not.
It's a learning-based model.
Yeah, great.
Learning will improve your risk management. Learning will improve your worker engagement. Learning will improve your relationship at a governance level. That's the crazy thing about learning. I don't know who invented learning. I'm trying to remember. It's such a long time ago.
It was the British. I think it was the British.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That because they invented Christianity and colonialism. So let's add learning in there as well.
We're going down the road of Australians stealing Phar Lap here in a minute. I'm going
to play some Crowded House now, just to keep it moving.
We might get shut down, mate. We might get shut down. Hey, Des, any questions from you while we got Brent on the line?
Yeah, just been making some notes furiously. It's been some really good material. But in the context of your comment, Brent, about the 1% of the 10% being knowing...
knowingly willful. Yeah.
Yes, and the idea that learning teams is system biased. How does that work alongside an organization that might have a just culture system in place?
I would say that's what just culture says as well.
So they're quite compatible or almost
100%. Well, it's really interesting. You guys have, this. I hear this all the time, the just culture tree.
Yep.
If you open a document from 2003 called the Department of Energy Handbooks for Human Performance, you will see a tree in there that is now called the Just Culture Tree, but was called the Culpability Tree, developed by James Reason. When James Reason wanted to come up with some mechanism for HR people to work out when disciplinary action was required. I mean, I sit here now and I share with you, none of this shit is new.
Yeah.
In fact, it wasn't new at James Reason's time. It's probably based on hundreds of years of case law.
Absolutely. But James Reason was saying, rather than this mixed messaging we give about accountability and responsibility, if someone knowingly performs an action, knowing the consequence of that action, knowingly, not error or a mistake, okay, because that's not knowingly, but if they knowingly do that, then that tree basically says that the culpability swings towards the individual. But at the same time, just because it swings towards the individual doesn't mean that there isn't organisational culpability.
Mm-hmm.
And Professor Woods has this concept called first story, second story. That when we investigate, we fixate on error, we fixate on the actions of people, and that's the first story. And that's so appealing because, I can deal with it quickly.
Yeah.
But he talks about the second story, and the second story requires effort, because the fact is that finding those systemic drivers, or what you guys might call root cause analysis, but we call them systemic drivers, things that drive the system, because context drives behavior, that takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Now in HOP, we don't say that gets solved with an investigation. With HOP, when we're running a learning team, we are presenting information to the organisation and to the workers for them to see similar systemic drivers in what they do. So all the papers that have been published about learning teams, the reason why it identifies 2 to 2.5 times more system issues than a traditional RCA model would do is because it is purely systems focused. That's its job.
Fantastic. Now, I'm going to throw a bit of another question at you there, Brent. So we got talking on it. Well, actually, to be fair, Andy was blowing his trumpet last week, right? And he was saying how great he was and, how things just came to him naturally and all this kind of stuff. And that's why he's such a good consultant.
That's not quite what I said, but thanks very much. I'll take it.
I can go back to the transcript, mate.
I'll vote for him on November the 5th.
And I guess so. Where we're going with that is, and I'm interested to get your thoughts. Is we felt that at some point people are potentially doing this learning teams thing naturally, right? So some people are maybe naturally good at it, and it just happens, and it's the way they facilitate their work. I mean, what are your thoughts to that?
Well, given that the majority of a learning team is about storytelling, who can't share a story?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's some people obviously that are better at it than others, right? But everybody can.
So what we find interesting that when we get a group of people together and they start to share their stories, they start to share their views of work, they start to share their views of things that go well, for instance, people will gain a voice. Because the fact is that I could get 10 people in a room and get 10 different views of that piece of work. And I'll give you a fact, we call that functional diversity. I'll give you a fancy name because we put these big words in books. And the fact that different workers can share. So if I take a piece of machinery, the people that set the machine up, that do the tooling, the people that run the machine, the people that clean the machine, see risk differently.
100%.
So a learning team is actually all about embracing the fact that it is normal for us to see risk differently. I mean, the three of you now, I guarantee that all of you will have a different appetite for risk. All of you will have a different perception for risk. Okay, that's why Andy drives a Toyota. Okay,
and doesn't climb trees.
Yeah. Okay, and that is normal. And a learning team respects the fact that we are different. But do our systems do that?
And so could a learning team be a progressive thing? I know maybe it's great to have everybody in the same room and get that LED firelight out and hold hands and whatnot. But I mean, I guess a learning team effectively could be a progressional thing where you maybe end up having conversations with different people along a journey to get to oh, actually, over a period of time, maybe moving into a new organization, you go out, you do your sort of due diligence, for want of a big word. You start talking to people, getting their story, and you paint a picture over time. Is that a concept as well?
4 Ds.
Yeah, great.
That's what we create the 4 Ds for.
Yeah. So that's that transitional learning team, as opposed to let's get everybody together, sit down in the same room and talk, because that's not always practical either.
So it's again the learning, you hold a learning team when you have a defined problem you want to solve.
Yes.
You don't run a learning team for fact finding.
Okay. Is that not? Would that not be the concept of using a learning team to look at the positives as well as not only when it went wrong?
100%. But you whether something's gone right or wrong, the only difference is how you look at the emotional component. So if I run a learning team because something's gone wrong, we have already gathered lots of information from people. And we're really pulling that learning team together to actually create that system change. And probably where a learning team differs is that we don't go out and gather statements. Okay, and these could be really interesting discussions that could be held. But I got to tell you, I don't know what someone writing something on a piece of paper actually does. Right?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I know when I take on a new role, I put a lot of time, effort, and energy into go out and just talk to people, just to engage
100%.
with people. And by the time you finish that, I guess that initial round of just discussions, and you get a pretty good feel for where the organisation's at, and maybe a few pain points along the way for people and the like. But it's not it's definitely not capturing statements from people. But listen, I've got to be that guy. I'm just being mindful of time, and I know Andy's been feverishly taking notes, as has Des. So I'll just jump over to Andy. I mean, any last words to wrap up, Andy? Because we could probably do multiple shows on this, Brent. It's been amazing. Thank you, Andy. Any kind of final words?
Or you can read the book.
Wrap up the show. Or read the book.
Yeah. This is the crazy part. The reason we wrote the book was that someone can pick it up and use it as a field guide.
Well, Andy tried, but failed dismally. Yeah.
Well, I think once again we apologise because his copy didn't include the crayon.
Honestly,
we got confused.
Wow.
So I just apologise.
The audience are witnessing the psychosocial harm occurring before their very ears here.
But he
brilliant.
But Andy, and even you guys.
Can we schedule a learning team for next week to work out while I'm crying on the inside?
Well, look, I would seriously suggest our hot beginner guides. Okay, as a nice way to start because they've got things you can colour in.
There we go. So we'll move on. Des, any final thoughts for you to wrap up our show?
Yeah, I think I stated in the show last week that in the context of an investigation, I think the purpose of an investigation is a very important thing to define. And that in my ignorance, my understanding of a purpose of a learning team was to learn something. And I felt that was a bit vague. And I'm wondering if you think that that's a fair assessment.
Well, yeah, it's not. I mean, the outcome is learning, but how it learns is actually going back to understanding work. I mean, my closing comment for you guys, I'm always puzzled that we use one technique to determine our risks, yet when the event happens, rather than going back and using the same technique and being curious about what assumptions did we miss or what changed from a system point of view and actually improve our risk management process, we don't do that. We bring in a whole totally different technique that will then drive a different outcome. And that's why a learning team is actually designed to go back and build on better systems and better work. on how to improve your risk management process. And that's the bit that I sit here and I get confused. Use one model for one end, one model for the other end. What the?
In the middle,
I agree
they
with you.
shall not meet. And on that note, Brent, again, I know you're a really busy man, and really appreciate your time, effort, and energy. Now, I'm actually gonna make an executive decision here. Could you please make available to us, Brent, for one of our listeners, one of your books? A little autograph would be great. Send the bill to Andy Evans, please. He'll happily include it in his lunch meal. And I think we can maybe have a wee little giveaway, I think, after this, and maybe somebody could actually find out a bit more about.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you guys can do 3 giveaways.
Wow.
Okay,
3.
anywhere in the world.
Anywhere,
Because
including
I
Canada.
know this podcast is only listened to just outside of Invercargill. So you can double your audience. Okay.
Wow.
So I'll give away 3 books.
3 books, and we'll go one from
Okay.
every continent. How does that sound? We can't give away the same a book to 2 people in the same continent, just to make it exciting. That'll be
And they
amazing.
can choose English or Portuguese.
Wow, you're just the guy that keeps on giving.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading my Portuguese book the other day. God knows what it was saying, but I was reading it. It's really good.
Might have to get some help transcribing our podcast, Brent. Listen, mate, it's been an absolute blast. Again, I can't thank you enough. And I know, as the simpleton of the group, I've come away with some great takeaways and a better understanding of learning teams and how I could apply it out there in the real world. And I'm sure the others have, and the other listener has as well. So massive thank you. Until we run into you at a conference randomly somewhere, take care and thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Brent.
Brent.